You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
It's Friday nights, and we're feeling all right. Welcome back to the Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And we're going pretty late tonight, just because I just could not figure out what I wanted to talk about today. Because I feel like we have covered this team this way, that way, to and fro, so and such. With a week to go, keeping in mind, a week from now, we won't have this issue. Because a week from now, we will have a preview, an actual game preview. Still don't know that we're going to have any guests this year or not. We might go like kind of around the horn and grab, somebody on a weekly basis rather than having it set. But I could not figure it out. I just sat there and racked my brain. Like, I want to talk about this. I'm like, no, I already talked about that. I'm going to talk about this. No, I already talked about that. So I crowdsourced. I took to Twitter and asked what you want me to talk about. We got about 3-4 things here that you want me to discuss. So we'll just go ahead and do that. I think that's better. I'd rather we did this more in 2020. Kind of the just, what do you want me to talk about? And we'll talk about it type thing. Not quite the mailbag, because we'll go more in depth. It's not just going to be like, all right, let's talk about one thing for a minute and then move on. No, we'll talk about things for about 7-8 minutes. So that's good. So we'll start with Ike Hamlin at Hamstand87. Constant fan negativity. Are we the worst? JJ, Cade, Harbaugh, etc. It seems like no matter how well we do, the most vocal fans never stop bitching. Now that is something obviously I've talked about quite a bit. It's been a long time because it becomes seemingly more prevalent during the season. And obviously this preseason, I've been more geared towards national media types, because I think that their disrespect for Michigan is pretty ridiculous. Not saying that I think that they should be like Michigan is going to be number one. Not saying that I think that they should be like, name every Michigan player an All-American. I just think it's funny that Michigan returns like everyone on offense from one of the better offenses in the country. And who's on what list? Like at least that the media is putting out. They're on some other watch lists. Heck, we had a College Wires list of all Big Ten preseason selections, right? One Michigan Wolverine made the list, and it was Mazi Smith. I think I felt very homerish, but I think I put 3 guys on that list. Now, 2 people voted with me. Actually, I put 4. I don't remember how I voted. I'm pretty sure I had Ronnie Bell. I know I had Eric All. And I definitely had Oluwatimi. Still struggling to say his name the way he says to say it. And yet, Mazi was the only one who made the list. Funny how that works. But as far as like the Michigan fans thing, yeah, I now it's been a long-standing situation for this Michigan team, going back to before I even paid attention to things like this. But the backup quarterback has long been the most popular man on campus. Obviously, Tom Brady, the starting quarterback, and ends up being the GOAT. And everyone wants Drew Henson. Everyone wants the shiny new toy. But when I started paying attention to this team super closely was 2005, 2006, when I was a student. And I don't remember that necessarily being the case for Chad Henne in 2005 and 6. But of course, in 2007, he got injured pretty much right away. So it was very short lived because we all got to see Ryan Mallett right out of the gates. But, that certainly, I'm sure there would have been a sect that was all about Ryan Mallett. And then, I do think that in general, yes, the Cade JJ thing, it's indicative of what the fan base has tended to be. everyone loved Tate Forcier until they didn't, and then they loved Denard Robinson. And then everyone loved Denard Robinson, and people will act like they never disliked him, but they talked about him having a little bit of a noodle arm, and they wanted to see Devin Gardner. Everyone loved seeing Devin Gardner until Shane Morris got on campus. Jake Rudock was the only one impervious. Essentially, with Wilton Spade, everyone wanted to see John O'Corn, and then Brandon Peters. But Shea Patterson, everyone wanted to see Dylan McCaffrey. Joe Milton, everyone wanted to see Cade McNamara. And with Cade McNamara, everyone wants to see JJ. And then obviously there's the Harbaugh of it all. Yeah, it's people were pretty quick to turn on Jim about 3-4 years into his tenure. I think probably 2018 was when it probably really started. In 2019, it started to really gain some steam a little bit. Now, when I say that, I do want to delineate. This is not Michigan fans at large. This is a vocal minority for sure. But these are the people that are confident enough. And this is one of the things I was thinking about recently. The internet, and this is more because I'm on political Twitter, but sports Twitter can just be just as crazy. But one of the interesting things about Twitter, Facebook, is that people can confidently put out really bad opinions, right? And I'm not just talking about your, hey, well, that's debatable type thing. People can put out some like just egregiously awful things, right? And it's like, it's really confusing that this is where we're at as a society. But I think that's kind of the same thing, right? Like I'm old enough to remember when people were complaining about the quarterbacks. And granted, quarterback was an issue in 2017. It was. But when the main issue was the offensive line, that was the chief concern, right? They could not protect. And it got better eventually, but by then, you were on your third quarterback or your fourth, essentially, by going back to John O'Corn. But it was Michigan fans are just really passionate, like any fan base. And I think to some degree, there's just a strong element of just it essentially, what's the word here? Introspection. And I always have to say this to some of my bosses, right? Because I'm not airing dirty laundry per se, but covering Michigan is different than covering like Tennessee, right? Like you can't just put out the same stuff. It's a much more discerning fan base, which I appreciate, honestly. Like I like that about it, but it does have that drawback where there is an element where Michigan fans, they want what they want, right? They're very particular. And sometimes those bars are really high to clear, not just from the media, but from the team, right? And I do wonder, and this is one of the things my best friend said to me today. He said, I wonder if if Cade McNamara did go out and have that Joe Burrow season, if the reaction would be, just imagine the season that JJ McCarthy would have. And I don't doubt that at all. I think that would be the case. But again, that's a vocal minority. And the ones that are going to complain, right? Things aren't just going to be good. And then in hindsight, they'll tend to look back and say, all right, that was great. I don't know that we're getting that from last year just based off of what happened against Georgia. I think people are really excited. I think Michigan fans are wanting so badly to be the top dog again. Not just beat Ohio State, but get back to like the 97 type thing. Win it all, be the best team in the country. I think that would quiet that a bit. I still think there'd be some out there that would be like, you didn't do it the way I wanted. But hopefully people are a little bit more patient and understand as long as the team's winning, then things are good, right? Because last year, certainly there was a lot of, we cannot beat Ohio State this way. And then they turned around and did it exactly that way. So I hope that whatever this offense and defense look like, Hopefully there's a little bit of trust that was earned from the coaching staff and, act accordingly. All right, let's continue on. We still have got some more topics to hit. But before we do, betonline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, I want to give an honorable mention to my nemesis, Patrick Barron, who asked how many games would Michigan win if Roman Wilson started at QB all season. Obviously, that was based off of Roman Wilson saying that he would be the Michigan's best quarterback. My nemesis, Patrick Barron. Be sure to harass him on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, in person. Whatever you want to do, just harass Patrick Barron. Make sure he wears the bear ears that I bought for him last year, which he had dared me to buy for him to wear. So, let's go to Joe Battistelli. The mainstream media and local media bashing the Michigan schedule for not playing a Power 5 opponent this year when they played a Power 5 or Notre Dame, which is still Power 5. In some cases, both, for the last 20 plus years. Yeah, it's been a long time since the schedule has turned out the way that it has, right? It's funny that it was like I went back before. I mean, you have to go way back. I mean, there have been years where Michigan's played like an FCS team, right? But it's been a long time since that's even happened. I remember I think the last time that happened was back in the Rich Rod era, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been a minute. But yeah, I mean, you look back in Notre Dame. Obviously, they played in 2018 and 2019. That series was on up until 2014 or whatever, 2013. 2014, and then took a couple of years off, came back. Now it's back on hiatus. Just in the Jim Harbaugh era, played Utah to open the season. Obviously, they played them at home and lost the year before, 2014. 2016, they played Colorado. I know that wasn't like a crazy schedule, but Colorado ended up being pretty good, went to the Pac-12 championship game. So they're right there. It's kind of funny how that worked. Same with Utah. Utah was thought to be a team that they could just roll over in 2014. Didn't work out that way. Utah's been pretty good really ever since. So you've got those two teams in back-to-back years. BYU as well, which is kind of that independent such. Then in 2017, they opened with Florida. They play a high-level Group of 5 team in Cincinnati. I know they weren't what they ended up being. They played a service academy as well in Air Force. 2018, like I said, Notre Dame. I can't remember who else they played. Oh, yeah, SMU and whatever. SMU and Western were the other two. 2019, like I said, Notre Dame. They didn't necessarily start out with anybody great, but Army was on there. You never want to play Army. And in 2020, there was no non-conference. 2021, who did they play last year? Oh man, I don't even remember. But yeah, it's been a long time. So it is really funny that it's become an issue, right? Because this has been it's been a long time, right? I mean, not all Power 5 teams are created equal. I remember back in 2006 complaining about Michigan playing Vanderbilt, but they still had to play Notre Dame that year. And that was kind of what propelled them. Can't really complain about Alabama because Alabama, even though they do play an FCS team generally every year, they still always usually have a pretty big opponent. But sometimes it doesn't turn out that way. It was 2019 when they played Duke to open up. But Michigan's had a pretty tough deal, and I think that they were supposed to play UCLA, and it didn't work out, right? So it is what it is, right? Like, there's been other schools that have had much lighter schedules, and sometimes there have been schools like Notre Dame, for instance, that has their independent schedule, and sometimes you just look top to bottom and you're like, ooh, that is a trash schedule. Yeah, like, I think 2012, I mean, yeah, they still had to play Michigan. They beat Michigan. They still had to play USC and all the schools they played every year. But it was like every team that was normally pretty good wasn't. So it kind of is whatever. So, you know what? I think it's fine to have a reprieve, right? Like, at this point, like, they still have to play 9 Big Ten games, right? If it was a 8 Big Ten game schedule and they had 4 really bad group of 5 teams like they do now, then it would be one thing, but they don't. So I think it's fine. It's this year, next year, and then they get Oklahoma, Texas, Washington. I mean, they played Washington. That's who they played last year. They played Washington last year. They'll play Washington again down the road to make up for the game that was missed in 2020. They've got a decent non-conference light. Would I like to see it get even better? 100%, man. I would love to see some home and homes get added. I'd love to see some schools like LSU, man. Come on, make that happen. Michigan and LSU have never played. That's got to happen, man. Could you imagine seeing LSU up here in Ann Arbor or going down to Death Valley to see LSU? Heck, I would much rather see Florida played at Michigan. Like, I'm tired of seeing Michigan play Florida, but how much more fun would it be to see them in home and home? I would love to go to Gainesville for that. See them up here. Plus, Gainesville's close to Orlando, so I could go to Disney for a day. Maybe 2. Depending on when in the year it is. I could leave on Wednesday, get down there, go to Disney Springs when I land. Get a Thursday, Friday in. Maybe check it out again for a little bit on Sunday. No, I'd have to work. All right. Let's move on. Let's go to Jay Bretzloff, who asks, first he says, always enjoy your work. I do appreciate that very much. Can't do it without you guys at all, of course. I hear a great deal on the D side about defensive coordinator Jesse Minter, Mozzie Smith, and the defensive line, Captain Mikey Sainer still, the Green brothers, etc. in the backfield. But I've heard nada, zero, zilch about the linebackers and replacing Josh Ross. Hashtag go blue. Well, I think in large part that's because we haven't, I think there haven't been a lot of questions that we have asked about linebackers. I've asked a few here and there, but I think it's also because we haven't had George Hilo yet as one of our assistants that we've interviewed in fall camp. They told us that we're likely going to get him next week. We haven't had him, and we haven't had, I don't believe we've had Mike Elston, if I'm not mistaken. Like I've said, my memory is so bad. I could be like, we haven't had Jim Harbaugh yet, and you would all remind me, like, you did. You asked him like 2 or 3 questions. I'd be like, oh, right, that did happen. Like my friend Davis. My friend Davis was like this in high school. I was always the one with a good memory, so this makes it that much more confounding. But yeah, we haven't really talked to George Hilo yet. So we haven't had the opportunity to really dig in to everything that is going on with the linebackers. Now, have heard just kind of in general that Junior Colson's been really good. Nikhai Hill-Green's coming on pretty strong. We'll see how that rotation goes with Kalel Mullings, Michael Barrett. Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely some pieces there. And Micah Pollard as well. I believe he might be a defensive end, though. I'm not exactly how that works, but it's I think it's just been quiet because we haven't had that position coach. That's not necessarily been a flashy position, but I also think that there's a lot of confidence in Junior Colson. He's been mentioned several times. Joey Velasquez as well has been mentioned several times. So I will be curious to see what George Hilo has to say about the position group. It's one of those things where it doesn't get talked about enough. I remember Steve Lorenz saying this to me back in like 2016, 2017. He said, teams with elite linebacker play tend to have those national championship level defenses. Now, it's not always right. Like, I think that the 15 and 16 Michigan teams had good linebacker play. I don't know that they were like elite, but obviously once Devin Bush became a dude, that kind of changed, you know. I think the linebacker play got to another level, but that's kind of what I think I expect Junior Colson to be. Not like Devin Bush, not the same kind of player, but have that kind of impact. And I think that is probably why it's just a quiet element. But I think it is funny because no one's really talking about the linebackers. And I think you have a potential All-American and a sophomore in Junior Colson right out the gates. That might be a little lofty, but I think he could be that type of player. I'd say probably more likely for his junior year, but at the same time, he got way more playing time last year than Devin Bush. So he's way more acclimated than Devin Bush was in his freshman year. So he could have that type of year that was more of a junior season for Bush because he's been more acclimated. But I feel pretty confident in the linebackers in general, and I think that's why we haven't talked about them that much. But anyway. All right, we're going to move on. We have got one more question that I am going to hit. Just want to make sure that that's the case. But stay tuned for a brief moment. Oh no, we've got a lot more now. All of a sudden. I was wrong. I refreshed. Trent Noop asked, what if Rich Rodriguez coached Michigan? Trent, you didn't even use the proper grammar there. So you're fired. Good place to do that. So we'll hit a couple of these for a couple of minutes since more people ask questions. Because I do appreciate y'all crowdsourcing this for me. Because like I said, I wanted to have a podcast just racking my brain for hours of what I was going to even talk about. Harbaughing at Funky Marco asks, basketball recruiting, where do things stand with those offered and who will drop first? I got to tell you what, man. I don't know if you listen to the podcast, but I've been and I haven't said this in a year, so you could be a newer listener. I don't touch basketball recruiting. Not at all. Juwan might be my boy. It's funny. I ran into him on the sidelines before the Orange Bowl playoff, and we had to. It was stupid. We in the media had to wear masks, but no one else in the stadium did. And being down on the sidelines, we had to wear our mask, but there were other people mingling around on the sidelines, not wearing their masks, and no one else in the stands had to, but we did. So there's a point to this. So I walk up and I'm like, "Hey, Juwan, how you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, good to see you." And I pulled down my mask just to be like, "I just want to make sure that you recognize that it's me." And he goes, "I could never forget you." So it was serious the way he said it. But no, I don't dabble in basketball recruiting at all. I never have, and I still won't. But I couldn't even tell you with a straight face who they're really going for in this next class. When they commit, I'll write about it. And we'll go from there. But I am definitely, and that's from a national perspective. I don't care nationally about basketball recruiting. I just don't. It is what it is. Sorry. I don't think that's I've been very clear, I think, in general. I know a lot about the parts that I care about, but there's a lot of parts that I don't care about, so I just don't cover it. I don't really care that much about NIL, and I probably should. But that's a lot of the reason why I don't know a lot about what's going on with it. Now I know, what Valiant's doing. I've been involved with them to some degree. I know what's going on with obviously the Ann Arbor NIL club and all of that stuff, but it's, I don't know. Get your trading cards, by the way. Got a couple pictures on some of those guys. Justin Bracey asks, what's the ceiling of this team with Cade starting versus JJ starting? I mean, it's honestly probably about the same, but it's hard to quantify because we know that the players will play for Cade. And it was noticeable when Cade took the field against Wisconsin in 2020 that the team perked up and it never went away. They perked up in a way that they weren't perked up under Joe Milton or even Jay and Dylan and all those other guys. Not saying that they don't do that for JJ. We just really haven't. I don't think it's the same. They believe in Cade and are like ready to go. They have utmost faith in him. And if JJ hasn't wrested away the starting job from Cade yet, then it's a moot point, right? Because the team believes that he's their best option to win. JJ gives you more capability in some ways, but he also might make more mistakes. We saw that against MSU. Cade doesn't get hurt. Does Michigan win that MSU game? Maybe. A good chance. So, he made a mistake at the end of the game. When the game was, in desperate need of a comeback, and it happens. So, I don't know that the ceiling is much different, either or, to be honest. Now, if JJ finds another gear, then maybe that changes. But Cade sounds like he's found another gear. So there's that. All right. Yeah, buddy. At Michigan. Has the Harbaugh era we all expected finally arrived? Are we going to be able to sustain being preseason equals or close to it with Ohio State for the expected Big Ten titles every year? Because we definitely have the talent on the roster now. I'm not really sure. I think I need to see it this year to be sure. Now, that said, I really think that 11-1, 12-0 is what Michigan will likely be this year. But I don't think that it hadn't arrived. I just think there's been some stumbling blocks. And I think a lot of it has been injury or roster related, right? A Wilton Spate injury in the Iowa game. Not saying that they win Iowa, but if he doesn't get injured, I think they beat Ohio State. And I think that would have changed everything. And I've long said bowl games that aren't playoffs don't really matter. And this playoff certainly mattered, and they weren't as close to Georgia as they should have been, of course. Yeah, so you live with that result and move on. But I think that I think that they've kind of been slightly there, but I think that Ohio State obviously has been an issue. As they played Ohio State close in 16 and 17, and then the next 2 years they didn't. Then they beat them finally. I think just having defensive coordinators that aren't predictable is really good. The offense can stay a mixture of unpredictable, which it was last year, or when it was predictable, there's nothing Ohio State could do about it. I think that's a great thing. Being able to have this maulers up front that take advantage. That's why I have a lot of faith in Michigan's ability to beat Ohio State this year. Because I'm not convinced that their defensive line is suddenly going to be able to handle Michigan's offensive line. They lose a few pieces. Michigan loses a few pieces. Michigan upgrades. I don't know that Ohio State does. So they've got some guys. I think JT Tumalau can be really good. We'll have to see it. Zach Harrison's been kind of ho-hum. He's kind of their Rashawn Gary in the sense of, I think he's probably doing what they're asking him to do, and it hasn't necessarily been this big flashy thing. Jack Sawyer's probably going to be pretty good. I don't know about the rest. The Tyleek Williams or whatever. Okay. But I think Michigan's offensive line against their defensive line is still a win. And if Michigan keeps recruiting guys like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, who we haven't seen yet, but it seems like they're going to be pretty good. They still got the three guys from last year. Dominic Giudice has been mentioned multiple times in fall camp by his fellow teammates. Not Rashawn Benny. I've heard Dom Giudice multiple times. And then on the other side, I think that with that in mind, talking about the defensive line against their offensive line, I think it's really weird and egregious that we keep on hearing that their offensive line, I've seen two places that their offensive line was considered the best in the country. Yet they lost Nick Petitfrere and Thayer Munford. And Michigan lost Andrew Vistardis and Andrew Stuber and puts in Olu Oluwatimi and Trente Jones. I kind of feel like there's no drop off, maybe even improvement for Michigan. While Ohio State got worse on paper. It makes sense to me with a new offensive line coach. I think Michigan wins the trenches. I think that's important. All right, that's going to do it for us this week, probably, unless I come up with something tomorrow. That'll do it. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching and or listening. Peace.